Evening, gearheads. Jonathan Green here, Jon Massengale. We've given him the day off today. He's been working too hard anyway, so it's me and Bob today. But we've got a good show for you.
Why would you do that?
I know. Well, he's never taken a day off, so you have to force it. But anyway, he's not here today, although he will be on the show. So for the girls out there, he will be on the show. But I've got the one and great Bob Varsha from his home studio in Atlanta. I'm in Austin, Texas. And today we're going to talk mostly Formula One and WEC. But we may dip into Indy. We have a bit of an RIP to give you as well, because one of the greats has gone. In fact, I think we'll start with that. But mainly, I would like to discuss the sort of, I guess, this new trend of youngsters being thrown into the depths of Formula One and then really being thrown out just as quickly. And I'm talking, of course, to about Liam Lawson. And we've got a journalist on the show from New Zealand. We got the reaction of Piastri from Australia. So we're kind of going around the world. And I think it's interesting to hear what people who do what we do, Bob, around the world have to say. And certainly Stephen McIvor, a good old friend of mine, works at Sky Speed with Greg Murphy, who is an ex-Kiwi supercar champion, four-time winner of Bathurst. So a very well-respected couple of names there from New Zealand, and they do a weekly show on Sky called Sky Speed. So we'll be hearing from Stephen McIvor. But, Bob, I'd like to start with, I'm sure, something that was a headline that neither of us wanted to read, and both of us know this man and know his career very well. Sadly, Jochen Mass has passed away last week. What your thoughts and take and memories of him?
Well, I have a lot of memories because he raced very extensively here in the United States in the IMSA series. And I can distinctly recall a race in the Camel GT prototype era when he and Bob Wallach were among the European superstars who came over to drive for wealthy enthusiasts here, like Rob Dyson and oh gosh, I'm forgetting the world's fastest garbage man, Bruce. I'm so
Canepa.
Sorry, he's no longer with us. But no. But anyway. And Bob Wallach, they were racing at Sears Point, and I was calling that race. Wallach had a bad accident, or looked bad at least. He crashed on the carousel corner, and I distinctly remember Jochen Mass pulling over to check on his friend Bob Wallach, and that impressed me very much. I was a Cub reporter in those days, and I thought, yeah, this is cool. I like this sport. If this is the way these guys treat each other. I saw Jochen most recently at the last October at the Chattanooga Motor Festival in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which it has just announced it's going to postpone this year's edition, having nothing to do with Jochen, but has to do with construction, I think, in Chattanooga. But they're going to postpone till next year, take a brief hiatus. But Jochen was there, and he is a great conversationalist in several languages, which embarrasses the daylights out of me. He had interesting taste in clothes, but he had a wealth of stories. Of course, he raced in Formula One, more than 100 races, took one and only one victory, and it was a bittersweet one because it was the Spanish Grand Prix at Mount Juic Park, where Rolf Stommelen crashed over the fence and several people were killed, a track official, a bunch of spectators, a photographer, and so on. It was just a horrible, horrible day. But Jochen was declared the winner for McLaren. Of course, drove with Mercedes in its sports car days at Le Mans. Jochen was the guy who was put in charge of the Mercedes juniors. Michael Schumacher, Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
That's right.
Carl Wendlinger. They all drove together. And that was because I think Jochen was so laid back and easy to talk to and very, very clear in describing, the car and what it's doing and how you deal with it and so forth. Just a lovely guy. And he had a stroke some months ago, and it finally took him last week at the age of 78, I believe.
Yeah.
Which scares the daylights out of me.
Yeah,
but, he'll be missed.
He'll be sadly missed. Yeah, I saw him last year too at I think it was Velocity Invitational, and I hadn't actually met him, so I introduced myself and I talked to him about Brian Redman, who he knows obviously very well from their sports car days when he was much younger. But you're right. I remember those silver grey sports cars with Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Schumacher and so on. And yeah, he was just one of those just real gentlemen of the sport, as you say, a great after-dinner speaker, a great guy to chat and talk motorsport with, and just a very enthusiastic guy. And he'll be sadly missed. And there was some nice stuff on Facebook from his family put out this week. And also, I know that James Redman, Brian Redman's son, also put that out. So if you are interested in learning more about Jochen Mass, feel free to look up his career and also what people are saying in epitaphs after his, sadly, early demise. One other subject, talking of great and affable drivers, there's been a story. I didn't speak to you about this before the show, but Bob, you can talk to this. What do you think? Carlos Sainz Sr. has been potentially put forward as a name, and I think he's put himself forward as a name to potentially replace Ben Sulayem or run against him as president for the FIA. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a wonderful idea. Having spoken to Carlos on a few brief occasions, he is a very thoughtful guy. Again, a guy who expresses himself very well, if not in as many languages as Jochen Mass could. But he's the kind of guy with a personality that you'd expect from a two-time World Rally champion and Paris-Dakar winner. He thinks before he speaks and considers everything in great detail. And I think, especially given all of the drama surrounding Mohammed Ben Sulayem's administration these past 4 years, I think he would be a positive change. I know the drivers would support that. I suspect a lot of the organizers around the world would, but it's worth noting that the FIA is a big organization, 140, 150 countries represented, large and small. And I think Ben Sulayem has a tremendous advantage as the incumbent because he can deal out favors legitimately to all of these tiny auto clubs in all of these smaller countries around the world, or big countries like Indonesia that don't have a big impact on the international scene. And in that way, he can make himself, he can endear himself to those voters. And so Carlos Sainz Sr., if he's going to campaign for the job, and that election's coming up later this year, he needs to put himself out there and start meeting these people if he hasn't already. And I hope it works out well for him. I think he'd be a positive. No
conflict of interest you would worry about?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
And I think Carlos Jr. actually plays a big role in trying to also be part with George Russell of making, of making the driver's view clean. I agree with you. I don't think there's a conflict of interest because of his gravitas within the sport. Heck, he just won the Dakar again, and he's still going. I've got a lot of time for Carlos Sr. He understands the sport. He's been successful in the sport. He's massively respected. And funnily enough, when Ben Sulayem got the job, I was quite positive about it because I was one of the few people who knew who he was, having lived out in the Far East at least. But we did know very much more about rally out there and Middle Eastern rally, of which Ben Sulayem was very successful. And I thought, okay, this. I could see the influence that the Far East and the Middle East were having on Formula One in terms of more races. This is a good fit. But I agree with you. I have not seen the positivity from his reign so far, and I would be sad if he did get another run at it because I just don't see. He's rubbed so many people up the wrong way with the swearing and so on and so forth. I just don't think he's made the impact that somebody in that role needs to, which is to be positive and to move the sport forward, to be a guiding light when Formula One is arguing about whatever, whether it be rules, Concord agreements, caps on
you can
spending.
only do that. You can only do that too if you have the respect of the people you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think, with all due respect, I think Mohammed Ben Sulayem has lost a lot of respect in the eyes of a lot of the people that his office as president of the FIA requires him to serve. And I don't know if the damage he's done is enough to not disqualify him from that job, but make the whole job so much more difficult. Whereas somebody comes in with a lot of respect, with an impartial approach, with only the greater good for everyone in mind. And I think that's what Carlos would bring, Carlos Sr., that is, to the job.
Yeah, and I agree. There's not many guys so well prepared and groomed and sort of perfect for it. Tom Christensen would be another, although I doubt he'd probably want it. But yeah, good to hear your thoughts on that. And we're going to take a short break. I'll take our first break, but we're going to talk more Formula One after the break because the two big stories: Colapinto in, Ollie Oakes out. Very interesting stories, and we'll also be hearing from Down Under as we turn to journalists in New Zealand for their take on what's happening in F1. Join us after this. Okay, let's see what's on the YouTubles. Yes, our usual Udon Tiny Thailand. Thailand? It says, hit the like. Thanks, man. And of course, Andy P's here. Hi, howdy, folks. And and jump in, guys, on your thoughts, whether it be on any of the subjects or any of the questions you might have. We had some good questions for Bob last week. So Bob is always ready to take on the fly, as they say. He is the sage, after all, the sage of Atlanta. So he'll be ready if you've got a question, and there are plenty out there. I'm interested to get into this story on Ollie Oakes, which kind of shocked us last week. We all thought that Ollie had a fracas with Mr. Briatore, but it turns out that wasn't the case, and it was a little bit more nefarious. We'll get to it in a moment, but that's one story. Yeah. And I'd like to discuss the subject of young drivers coming into Formula One. So again, YouTubers, feel free to jump in. MBS has tried for real power play in the FIA and feels like it all would take is a real opponent to oust him. I agree, Andy P. Couldn't agree more.
I'm Liam Lawson, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back to Speed City, and yes, it's Sunday evening with your Speed City, a weekend off from Formula One, but Imola is coming quickly, and there's a lot going on, and you just heard from Liam Lawson there, and that's who I want to pick up on, because, as you know, unless you've been under a rock, Liam Lawson got the nod to go into Red Bull and start driving alongside Max Verstappen after Perez was dropped. There was a lot of, certainly on my own part, a lot of positiveness. I've known Liam now for best part of 10 years, actually. I know his family. He raced twice, 2 seasons in the Toyota Racing Series. And I was there the day he signed for Red Bull on his birthday, February 11th. So, there's a personal side to me, and I just felt... it's something that we talk about in this interview we're about to hear, but that Toyota Racing Series, their sort of mantra, their byline, if you will, is creating New Zealand's next world champion. Now, you could argue that Hartley and Bamber have done that in sports cars, but really it's aimed at Formula One. And there was a big belief amongst the 4 million around in New Zealand that Lawson could well be that guy to follow in the footsteps of Denny Hulme and be that F1 world champion. But it took a setback. So, without further ado, I called up my buddy, Stephen McIvor, and we had a good long yarn about it, and I'll put the full podcast up later this week. But there's a few snippets here that we'd like to share with you, and Stephen McIvor is his name, and he has his own radio show and his own TV show called Sky Speed, which he does with Greg Murphy. And my first question to him was, what is the take of both the fans and himself about what's happened to Lawson of late?
I think the reaction was a funny one. You were there with the opening weekend, I think. No, you weren't actually. I apologize. The opening weekend of the summer series here happened with an historic Grand Prix in Taupo, and it was absolutely crazy. Liam Lawson was the special guest, and in my time in motorsport, which is not a long and vast, it's maybe 15 years, I've never seen a crowd turn up to watch older cars race, but not want to watch them because Liam Lawson was there. And they had signing sessions both days, and I have never seen the style of fandom that you would expect at higher classes around the world, like IMSA, WEC, and of course Formula One and the likes, and NASCAR and IndyCar. I went, wow, this is so Liam Lawson going to Red Bull at that time took the country by storm. Specifically, fans goes and performs terribly. Doesn't get a hold of the car at all, and everybody's going, "Uh-oh, the dream is about to be squashed pretty quickly." And when it was a funny one. The vibe changed, and in this country, we've got this thing, as you are aware, called tall poppy syndrome. We just don't. We hate people being successful.
Same in Britain, by the way.
Yeah, we know that, right? Don't get in front of the Fleet Street press. And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. They didn't really knock him for a six because he's racing for someone else and he's not racing in front of you on your own doorstep. And so the vibe was pretty accepting. The coverage was enormous in the media. Now that he's dropped back into racing balls and really not doing his job, everything's softened a bit, but he's still making the front page of websites and things like that. And people are still going, oh, well, it was actually Doohan's fault in Miami. Well, if you look closer, it was actually Liam's fault for squeezing him out. You know, I mean, we looked at long and hard on our show and we went, well, hang on a minute, Liam, you're actually, you're on the wrong here. And there's a real sense now. Well, there's two sides to this, Jonathan. There's a sense he's overdriving and rushing to get points. And I don't think that surprises anyone in the industry. And there's a sense, though, it might not last. And that would be a disappointment for him. But by the same token, and I think we've talked about this a lot in our show, who's looking after him?
Yeah.
We know he has a local manager here, but his local manager has said basically he's out of his depth in Formula One, right? He has a team around him that look after his affairs. But he doesn't, from what I understand, have a team that understands F1 properly and that has history with F1 and knows how to deal with the drama and everything that goes on with it, but more so the politics behind the scenes.
Well, a representative, a manager, somebody that can actually
which leads us to Mark Webber being here for a Porsche anniversary in Napier. They were celebrating, I think, the 50th anniversary of the Porsche Club. And he was over here and he was asked about it. He goes, yeah, he needs help. And when you think about it, and it's obvious when you talk about Mark Webber, he looks after Oscar Piastri. We don't really need to look after Oscar because he's doing sweet, And we're all Team Oscar now. To be fair, he's one of us. He's an Anzac. He's an Antipodes. We'll take him. But most importantly, he understands Red Bull. He understands F1. He understands the dynamic of what it is to be a Formula One driver and what you have to navigate to be successful. And I think someone needs to get in Liam's ear. Someone asked me on a radio interview the other day, who's got the duty of care for Liam? And I went, that was a really interesting point, because every time I think of duty of care, I think of their mental state, their mental health, right, to make sure everything's right. And I went, oh, hang on a minute. And I think maybe that's where we're at the moment. I think, and there is a feeling that he's not well represented. He's not really diving into it, and he needs to refocus harder. He will say stuff, it'll come. But the question we have to ask, are you actually doing the work? Are you, Liam Lawson, doing the work? That may sound harsh. That's fine. Remember, we were living in a world of supposition. What we're thinking, what's going on. We're wondering what's going on. And the only gauge we have is performance on the track. And that's what it comes down to. And sorry, that's how it works. So if he continues to drive like this, continues not to score points, I'm not so sure he lasts. Right. But, and you and I both know, Jonathan, they've got a magnificent stable, but Arvid Lindblad, who came out here and won the Castrol Toyota Formula Regional Oceania Championship, was magnificent at this level. Magnificent at this level. He's won a sprint race.
That was pure genius, what he was putting on.
Yeah, but he was also incredibly focused.
Mhm.
Wasn't really. He didn't look like, shall we say, one of the boys. He
And he's
looked
already
like
won in Formula 2, which is incredible.
he's what?
He's already won in Formula
Yeah, but that was yeah, but
You know,
we
and
could argue
Richard
that we could
Verschoor's
argue that
been
it was
there
a
for
sprint
5 years.
but we could argue it was a sprint race, couldn't we?
Sure.
Yeah. And he sits seventh in the championship. There's another Red Bull teammate ahead of him, and you go, okay, but let's see what happens. The question is, and this is what I don't know about Lindblad, money. Does he bring money? Because I'm not sure. I don't think Liam brings money, right? He's been a product. They saw him years ago at the Highlands Motorsport Park, passing Marcus Armstrong on a corner at speed in the wet, passing through the bus stop, which were, for anyone, God, they were. And you know, sometimes, Jonathan, I think, why don't you go and sit and look in a mirror and ask yourself, this is Liam, how did I get here? And remember how you got here, and go back to that stage, go back to that mindset, and then go again. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot bubbling that we're not seeing, that may not be creating the right environment to then him hop in that car, go right, here we go.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I'm hearing things that I just don't like, and you know that and you don't want to spread rumors. That's irresponsible. But it doesn't sound like the camp is a happy one for the Liam Lawson brand.
Yeah, that's Stephen McIvor there talking from Auckland in New Zealand about the opinions on Liam Lawson. It was quite enlightening. Bob, I'd like your take, but he doesn't hold back, does he?
No, not at all. And he makes a lot of good points, particularly with regard to management and the fact that, you know, the most effective manager in the world in the junior formula doesn't necessarily mean he's going to give you adequate representation in Formula One, which, just like the race cars, is a whole different animal altogether from the junior formula. And I know this past week when Pablo Montoya offered the opinion that that Liam won't last because Arvid Lindblad, who you talked about, you know, is doing so well and seems to be the kind of personality that Helmut Marko likes. You know, he is a solid, ice cold, totally focused individual with skills. So, you know, we all hope for the best for Liam, but you know, there's only 20 seats. Just ask Jack Doohan.
Yeah, there's no question. And in the first interview, and we've put it out, it's out on our playlist on YouTube if you want to go and look at it. But the first interview I did with Arvid Lindblad, because he's a chirpy chappy, he's a nice guy from the UK, and he's got sort of a triple heritage because he's got an English mother, an Indian mother, and a British father, and he's also got a Swedish. Sorry, his father was from Sweden. They live in England, right? So he carries all three flags on his helmet. But he's a well-educated kid, very focused, as you say. And I was a little disappointed in my first interview with him because I said, "So, outside of racing, what do you do? What's your hobbies?" And he said, "I don't have any. I'm just training." And it was sort of straight out of the Red Bull playbook, but it was kind of like, "Come on, man, I'm trying to give you some publicity here." So he was a little hard work at first. He warmed up to us when we realized we weren't trying to trap him into something. But he is a classic product of modern day motor racing, which is total dedication. You mentioned it, ice cold. And I actually think it's an area we don't often talk about. We love personalities as journalists because we love Ricciardo and people like that, and Norris, because they wear their heart on the sleeves. But it can get them in trouble. You need that ice cold ability sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't know who Arvid Lindblad's management is, but they,
same as Norris's,
oh, is it?
Yep.
Oh, because I was about to suggest they might have told him, look, when you do an interview, here's what you need, because you're not talking to the outside world or to the journalist you're looking at. You're talking to Helmut Marko and Red Bull.
Well, there was no question in the 6 weeks I spent with him early in January and February. That was what was on his mind. He was very guarded in every interview. We tried, me and Stephen, even because Stephen's the host of the series for TV, and it was kind of like a running battle because it was Stephen that had to deal with him at the end of each race, and he never got much out of him because I'm not going to get anything out of you, am I? And Lindblad just sort of looked at him like sort of po-faced going, I don't know really what to say to that. I've got, I'm on remote control at the moment, and I'm talking, as you quite rightly put out, to Helmut Marko. Right. So I don't care what questions you answer because I am going to give you the corporate answer because I want to be a Red Bull driver, and that's all that matters. Great stuff.
Pretty much.
Interesting take from him. We're also going to hear from Stephen again, if we've got time, because he does talk about Colapinto. So why don't we take another short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the two biggest stories of this week, Colapinto and Ollie Oakes. All right, let's have a look at the YouTubers. The Ollie Oakes thing, and this is AP again, Andy P. Ollie Oakes thing didn't make sense till I saw the story about his brother and lots of angles that maybe none of it has anything to do with Alpine, and I think that is the case. It was just it just happened that Colapinto got his chance, and literally a day later, Ollie Oakes quit, and so it looked on paper anyway, as we suppose, that he'd fallen out with Flavio. Bob and I know the inner workings of the mind of Flavio Briatore because we've watched him. We watched him get banned for life from motorsport for being part of the very historic, the Nelson Piquet Jr. Crashgate. Yep, which allowed Alonso, his teammate, to win the race and pit while Piquet suddenly came in. It wasn't the smartest of moves. It was caught out. And, of course, Flavio was put to blame.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, for a change, Max isn't the main story of the weekend between races. He has been most of the season because it's been a real roller coaster for Red Bull. Max is doing what Max does best, which is outperforming the car, but clearly even Yuki not able to really help him yet, although he has made a better fist of it than Liam Lawson. Now, the big story of the week, or the most bizarre story of the week, for me anyway, Ollie Oakes quitting Alpine. And it's interesting for a couple of reasons. Ollie Oakes wasn't just the team principal at Alpine. He's also the managing director of Hi-Tech, which has several junior teams and an F1 Academy team, F2, F3. They were once owned by Mazepin, the money that Mazepin brought, the oligarch, of course, whose son raced for Haas. But the company now, Hi-Tech that is, not Alpine, is run by Ollie Oakes. But it turns out a director of that company is his brother, who has been remanded in custody and was arrested last week at Hi-Tech, or at least in the car park, at the Silverstone Park, which is where Hi-Tech are based. What was your thought on that, Bob?
Well, I mean, obviously there's an awful lot of details that we don't know. But the initial impression was, this all has to be connected somehow. Whether Ollie Oakes just, wants to remove himself from the situation because his brother is in apparently deep trouble and is going to need his help, or whether Flavio or somebody from Renault came forward and said, okay, Ollie, we can't have this sullying our reputation, so please step aside. We don't know exactly why, but it wouldn't be the first time that criminal activity, in all honesty, became deeply involved in motorsports, and we've certainly seen worse. But who doesn't go around with 30,000 British pounds or whatever it was in his pocket? It's a situation that's going to come to the fore over time. It's going to take time. That's just the way criminal investigations work. And what Ollie, he may be summoned to testify if his brother goes to trial. which is another reason he may want to step out of the limelight and try to keep this, within the family. But we just don't know.
The details, as much as I can get anyway, were he was arrested, as you say, with quite a lot of cash on him, which is never a good scene, especially that kind of money, £30,000.
Right.
But he was arrested for transferring criminal property. And without getting too into the weeds, motor racing over the years, Bob, has had a reputation, given its transport and cargo movement. And, transporting contraband has been there, done that, and many people have been caught going between countries, especially in Europe, and trying to use the vessel of motorsport or the cars or the trucks to get either money or potentially sometimes drugs. It could be anything, but it's never a good look when you get swooped in like that.
Yeah. The charge sounds basically like the American equivalent, which would be fencing stolen property, or criminal, what would they call it, the product of criminal activity.
Well, look, the other story was also to do with Alpine, and that, of course, is Franco Colapinto. And this is a story that's really run right from the beginning of the season. And I thought it was very unfair that Diuguid was told almost before, well, he was told before Australia, or it was in the public before Australia, that he might not even get in a chance to race because of Colapinto's performance. What happened, if you don't know, is that he got a chance to race with Williams last year. He's an up-and-coming driver. And in fact, let's have a look at him in action, because I was there when he won his first international race. Here's Franco Colapinto down in New Zealand. Franco Colapinto of Argentina. Could this be his chance to shine? He hasn't had a podium yet, and he's in a podium position. So it just shows you that Colapinto is in control of this race because he's actually as quick, if not quicker, than Lawson. And so he is heading towards victory. Just a couple of corners to go now for the famous 43. Remember, the feature race is about the Formula One Argentinian trophy from 1974. Colapinto knows it too. But this is a bit of history as 16-year-old Colapinto of Argentina comes up the hill at Hampton Downs and takes the checkered flag for the first time. His first win in the Castrol Toyota Racing Series. Yeah. Interesting, because that trophy I mentioned was won by Bruce McLaren, and it was his last ever Formula One trophy, third place in Argentina. So I would have thought Franco would have really appreciated that. We haven't had that many great Argentinians, and, obviously we had the greatest of all time, or can be one of the greats, Fangio. I really do think the excitement around Colapinto is both valid and interesting, Bob.
Oh, no question. And, truth be told, it's worth noting that he brings money, and a lot of it from an Argentine energy or power company, has very vocal top management in that company. They are huge supporters of Franco Colapinto. So, that's another log on that fire, as it were, so to speak. And we'll see what happens. He gets 5 races. And I will say about Jack Diuguid, when they stood him down, he handled it with a lot of grace. Perhaps his father, the multi-time MotoGP world champion, told, look.
Saw Colapinto come to New Zealand. So here's his take. And funnily enough, exactly the same as yours, Bob, puts it down to money.
Oh, gosh. Well, let's put it this way. As soon as Flavio came in in his role, you knew stuff was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
The S was going to hit the fan.
Exactly. Right expression.
And as Jack Diuguid said last week, nothing gets out by chance when it comes to gossip and news. I felt for him. I think it was even worse than being in Liam Lawson's situation. I think that Jack Diuguid was absolutely reamed that way, and I feel for him. But by the same token, results weren't flash, were they? They weren't great. And he got one crack at the end of the last year. Don't judge that, but they've got a whole off season. His teammate doing okay, manhandling the car. Again, you know what? It sometimes makes you realize, and then you look at Kimi Antonelli and go, well, actually, Kimi Antonelli could be a generational talent, more so than I think Colapinto. I think you wonder, really, are they throwing these kids in a little bit too early? You know, let's be really blunt about this. And this one probably is a no-brainer. Are the teams just looking at the amount of money that some of these teams can bring? Like we know with Alpine that Colapinto's, it's Mercado Libre is already on the car. They're a major sponsor. They were talking about it. That was leaked that they were saying he's going to be in for Emilia Romagna. I feel for Jack. Of course you do. He's an Anzac, right? But did he look like he could? Did he show anything in his time in the car? Unlike Liam, who when he subbed for Ricardo, looked like he could offer something.
Looked like the pace.
And that's the crazy thing, right? I'm sorry, I'm digressing slightly, but when Liam subbed for Ricardo, he looked good. He looked, yep, you deserve to be there. You look great. You know, and he out qualifies Max in Singapore. Now, not many people have out-qualified Max in his career, right? In his Formula One career, and you go, right, you're ready, pal. Off you go, right? Circumstances in a crap car haven't helped him. The doing one is like, yeah, mate, I don't know. And then Colapinto gets his crack in Williams, bashes the car up, costs him millions of dollars. And you go, are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you really ready? And then so there's this thing going on with now Flavio's going, well, maybe we're going to rotate people. He's got 5 races to show himself. And you're going, what is going on?
It's almost like they've seen what Behrman and Antonelli can do, and now Hadjar. And to a certain extent, you know, they're almost willing to play with these kids' lives or kids' careers. You know, and that's the cutthroatness of
version of America's Got Talent in Alpine at the moment.
Yeah,
good chance. Let's see if you can make fun.
So, okay, just to sum it up, and so people understand, because this is all fairly fresh. They've dropped Duiguid as of this weekend, and therefore he won't be racing next weekend at Imola. It will be Colapinto. But I think the saving grace for Duiguid, and I think he's been very good in the press to sort of address this humbly, is that they've only said that they're replacing him for 5 races. Colapinto's got 5 races, which is similar to Marco saying, okay, you and Yuki go head-to-head at Red Bull to decide who's the better driver at the end of last year. And that didn't really kind of work the way they wanted it. And Yuki didn't get, well, he got a test, but he didn't get the drive. And then they're going to have a reassess of their driver lineup in a test before Silverstone. So that kind of leaves the door open for Duiguid. And I would have thought, talking to managers, you don't need a better manager than his father, Mick Duiguid, who knows motorsport as a 5-time world champion and is a hard nut to crack, because I worked with him over the years. Mick Duiguid knows who to call, has got friends in the industry, has been in Duiguid's, at races with his son, and so is a great advisor for the trials and tribulations of motor racing at the highest level. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but it is brutal, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how bright that light is at the end of the tunnel for Duiguid, though. I don't know what it is. There's something that just doesn't click with me. But I think his saving grace, as you have said, hasn't bought into the BS, and has handled himself beautifully. I hope a young Kiwi boy looks at that and remembers that. And,
finally, Stephen, what are you telling the listeners and viewers in New Zealand on Sky Speed this week? What's going to be the headline? Well, that's why we called you, was to find out what the New Zealand F1 fans are thinking about, or even just motorsport.
Well, it's a bit quiet in motorsport this week, but the big thing is, of course, the Sainz Prix Grand Prix month of May, Indianapolis 500, and of course on the road course this week. So that'll be our big focus this week, seeing if our Kiwi boys can get themselves going. I mean, Scotty Mac's a fave in this part of the country, considering his exploits when he was a supercar driver on a supercar weekend. Right. So they've had a wee break, and the supercars are back in Tasmania. Very short little track at Simmons Plains. It's like I think it's almost an under 60-second lap, and they've got this amazing hairpin that literally is the perfect. If you looked at it, you'd go, oh, that looks like a hairpin. And it's exactly what it is, but it can create all sorts of carnage. And the good headline for supercars in this season so far is that they've allowed them to race and be a little NASCAR-like and bang door handles.
Good.
And drivers are loving it. Fans are loving it. And team owners going, it's cost.
Yeah, interesting stuff. No question about it. It just, to me, I'm wondering, Bob, whether you've been around this sport for longer than I have. Was it always this way, or has things changed?
No.
And is now we're literally playing with these kids' careers, and as you said at the beginning, and Stephen said it there, money, money, money. Lawson has no money. He's expendable. And so too, anybody like Diuguid, who really doesn't have the money.
Yeah.
And when Colapinto comes in and here's a bag of cash, okay, well, you better get in the car then.
Yeah. Putting the money aside, though, while we were listening to that interview, and I really like Steve's perspective on things.
Yeah.
I looked up most races before some level of achievement, some result, as Helmut Marko would say. The record for most Formula One Grand Prix before scoring his first point is held by Nicola Lorini back in the days when points only went to the top 6, not the top 10.
Yeah.
And he went 44 races before he scored his first point. Yep. Even more dramatic is the most races before scoring their first win. The record, 194 Grand Prix. Sergio Perez before his first victory. And you look down the list, Perez, Carlos Sainz, 151, Mark Webber, 132, Rubens Barrichello, 125, Jarno Trulli, 119, Jenson Button, 115, and the list goes on and on. I mean, drivers used to get an enormous amount of time and experience to prove themselves. Mika Hakkinen is another, Nigel Mansell is another, all these great names that we think of as these extraordinary winners and world champions had to struggle like hell, but at least they had the opportunity to struggle like hell, to learn their craft and to find that sweet spot in time that allows a driver to achieve a Formula One Grand Prix victory.
Good words. Then let's take a short break and we'll come back because we've got a little bit of insert and wet to talk about after the break because we've got a very, very interesting guest, Penske Porsche. Join us after this. Yep, Andy P says, I agree with the reporter's take. Feels like this is Flavio's version. He says that this is Flavio's version of Hunger Games with the seat, and Diuguid was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But yeah, it just seems a little bit more cutthroat than it's ever been. I mean, you expect Flavio to make decisions like that. He always did. But it seems like it's a waste of time having a junior program when you invest so much time in them, only to discard them. I mean, Diuguid could get picked up now by Cadillac, for example.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's a big part of the problem is the teams are spoiled for choice. All these guys, regardless of their level of talent or commercial support, want to be in Formula One. So, if you have a seat to offer, you're really in a unique position with a lot of leverage. And, you can afford to try a few before you find a driver with real potential.
Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back to Speed City. We're going to change subjects now. We've talked about the young drivers, and yes, it's all about money. But we're going to turn our attention now to an event that's coming to Austin, Texas, September 5th to the 7th, and that, of course, is the World Endurance Championship and the Lone Star Le Mans. Jon Massengale spoke to the head of Penske Porsche. Here's what he had to say.
We're delighted to welcome to the show Jonathan Diuguid, the managing director of Porsche Penske Motorsport. In his role, Jonathan manages the Porsche Penske racing team competing in the FIA World Endurance Championship and IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship with factory-backed Porsche 963 LMDH prototypes. As we look ahead to the Lone Star Le Mans coming here to Austin in September, we couldn't think of a better guest for the show. Jonathan, welcome to Speed City.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Two of the most iconic names in racing, Penske and Porsche. They have a long intertwined history dating back to the 1970s. But when did this current collaboration start, and why?
I think the program was announced in May of 2021 between Porsche and Penske, and honestly, it was a partnership that was formed out of common goals. And obviously, the two groups have had success together. You know, like you said, Roger early on in his racing career had success in Porsches, and then through the Can-Am days with Mark Donohue and modern era with the RS Spider prototypes. And so, Porsche was looking to form a global partnership with a team that was able to run in IMSA and in the WC. And so they reached out to us, and I guess the last 3 years is history since that point, but a lot of hard work has gone in since that announcement.
Yeah, I would imagine. But you are in a unique position that you operate in both the IMSA and WEC programs for Porsche. Can you talk a little bit about how that works from an organizational standpoint? Are there crossover in personnel across both championships and both series, or are they dedicated sets?
Yeah, sure. I think, Penske and Team Penske is typically viewed as a North American racing team, but obviously we branched out into V8 supercars and Roger in Formula One, a while ago. But we had to set up an entirely new organization team to support the WEC program in Germany. The team's based in Mannheim, which is about 45 minutes south of Frankfurt. We converted an old Penske Porsche dealership into a race shop with a multi-million euro restoration, and it's an amazing facility. But as far as people and personnel, the two teams are staffed to be autonomous, but we take advantage of the global partnership as much as possible. There's 2 or 3 people like myself that support both championships as much as we can physically get to them. I flew from Long Beach to Laguna Seca for a test, and then out here to Imola in the past 7 days. So it's been a bit of a busy stretch, but in general, we have information transfer, and technology helps a lot too as well with online meetings and things like that. So both teams are fully informed of what everybody's doing, and we try to use the strength of both teams to go to the front.
Yeah, well, talk about all the logistics of all that. Germany and USA, it's like running a Formula One team that you mentioned.
Sure.
And you mentioned some of the tools. I mean, I'm assuming you use things like Zoom, but what else do you use to keep everybody on the same page?
We have an ops room that's supported by Porsche for the races, where it's staffed with 8 to 10 people. That's based in Weissach in the factory in Porsche Motorsport, and that's supporting tests and races. We have driving simulators too as well, which is also based in Weissach. And so sometimes engineers go on site, sometimes they manage those tests remotely, and so we just try to be as efficient as possible because, like you said, the WEC is a world championship, so we race, on 4 different continents, all around the world, and have to deal with different time zones as best we can, and do things like that. So we're using all the tools at our disposal.
Yeah, that's right. It's early morning for me, and speaking of Europe, you're in Imola right now, getting ready for the next race, and the first round for you guys was, by Porsche Penske standards, not great, but in IMSA you've won all 3 rounds so far, so you've had a great start there. But what have you looked at since Qatar to make it right for this weekend in Imola?
I think, when we have difficult weekends, and like we had in Imola, it's all about focusing and trying to figure out where we can improve and what we can control. The thing about racing is you can execute a perfect race weekend and still finish mid-pack. That's obviously not where we want to be. So we're definitely trying to improve the performance. And after Qatar, we went and executed three tests. Some focus on performance, some focus on endurance, but the goal was to make sure we showed up to Imola in a better spot performance-wise than we did in Qatar. And that's where we started this morning with practice 1. It was a little damp, but feedback from both driver crews was that the cars are handling well, and we're looking forward to the race on Sunday.
Well, good luck with that. And I mentioned at the top of the show, we're based here in Austin, Texas, and we have the Lone Star Le Mans coming here in September. This is a huge event for us here in Austin. How big is this event for you guys in the landscape of both IMSA and WEC? How does that play in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Circuit of the Americas is an amazing facility, and it's hosted top-level motorsport over its years, and to be able to bring the WEC Championship back there, to bring world sports car racing to to the United States outside of IMSA, I think is amazing because, you know, the strength of the WC right now is that it's got, you know, over 10 manufacturers in the prototype championship, including Ferrari, Toyota, Porsche, obviously, and different manufacturers all pushing. And the technology in these cars is quite amazing too, as well. I would say the hybrid drive systems rival what's in Formula One cars, and being able to showcase that technology, as well as, you know, the talent of our racing drivers and our teams, is really enjoyable. And, you know, as an American myself, it's fantastic to be able to participate in a world-class event and an event part of the World Endurance Championship in my home country.
You know, I got to go to Daytona this year and got to hear those cars and see the prototype class, that hybrid drive system. It's really, like you said, it's the technology rivals Formula One. It's amazing. Has that been popular with the fans?
Yeah, and it is, and I think it's also very visible. You know, the unique thing about the LMDH prototypes and the Le Mans hypercar prototypes is that they leave from the pit box on electric power, and so you hear the transition from electric power to the combustion engine, and it offers you know, quite an auditory experience to where, you know, you hear that very clean electric sound, and the cars launch extremely fast because they have a lot of electric power, and then they switch over to the different combustion engines. That's also a unique characteristic of our championship, is there's many different engine architectures, from twin turbo V8s to twin turbo V6s to naturally aspirated V8s, and all kinds of different engine layouts with varying degrees of exhaust and things like that. So you can turn your back to the racetrack and you can hear when a Porsche comes by, you can hear when a Cadillac comes by, you can hear when a Ferrari comes by, just based off of the sound. And, you know, I think having that variety is extremely exciting, and the fact that all those cars can race against each other on a platform that's equal to everybody gives manufacturers an opportunity to showcase their products.
That is one of my favorite things about you guys in the sports car series right now, that you have so many different ones, so many different manufacturers with different types of the second half of the powertrain, right? Like you described. And that's got to be good for the fans, right? Like if you've got, you know, Ford, Chevy, Porsche, Ferrari, all the different fans, they relate to what they see on the track.
Absolutely. And I think you've seen that with how both the WEC Championship and the IMSA Championship have grown over the past 3 years. I think we've got 3 new manufacturers that are coming in here in the next year or two. So it's just showing that the platform is working, and beyond the technology and beyond the, you know, the race cars and the attachment to the different brands, the racing on track and the racing product is also fantastic. It's wheel-to-wheel racing, it's multi-class racing, so there's passing every single lap. And so I think the excitement level for people when they come to the circuit, beyond hearing the cars and seeing them go by, is the actual wheel-to-wheel racing that we experience.
But I'm going to be a little more selfish and just ask one more question about Circuit of the Americas, because we are here in Austin. And what do you think of when you think of coming to COTA, and particularly in the challenge that you got with the team you're with, Porsche Penske now?
I mean, you know, it's in the middle of our overseas run, so we're coming from Sao Paulo to COTA, and then we go on to Fuji. So there's some logistical challenges there, but in general, Circuit of the Americas is an extremely dynamic circuit. It's got a combination of high-speed corners and low-speed corners. And you being based in Austin, you know that August can be quite warm. And so I think it taxes not just the tires, but it taxes the engines and the cooling systems, and also the drivers too as well. And so to be successful in Austin, you have to check all those boxes, and it's extremely challenging and difficult. And so that's a unique part about that race. And you have to get it all right. And being able to have a car that works around the whole track is a big challenge for our engineers and also for our drivers.
Yeah, and also for the entire team, like you said, logistically getting in and out of there and heading, you know, to all the different, coming from a long distance, going long distance. But I want to switch to Le Mans. We can't talk about the sports car racing. We're talking about Le Mans. How important is winning Le Mans for you guys this year? If you did, it'd be the 20th, I believe. If you can do it, the 20th time Porsche won there.
Yeah, it is the 20th time. I think, you know, we've checked some endurance racing boxes already this year, winning the 20th Daytona 24 hours for Porsche, like you mentioned. And I think it's the 19th Sebring 12 hours that Porsche has captured the overall victory. And so we're trying to get into the 20s on all those marquee events. And, you know, Le Mans is something that the 963 hasn't been able to finish on the top step of the podium, but it's, you know, clearly an iconic race car already. And we've shown that it's an endurance champion in the IMSA program. And so we're really focused on making sure we can put it on the top step of the podium at Le Mans this year.
Interesting. Last 30 seconds of the show. He's taken us to the top, but very interesting interview. And Bob was an ex-IMSA man and an American. I think you must be happy with the way IMSA and WEC has gone.
This is the golden age of sports car racing. And it's interesting, too, that with the same car, Penske hasn't won in WEC and hasn't lost in IMSA. It's all down to the BOP.
7th of September is the race day, 5th to the 7th. Get your tickets for Lone Star Le Mans. Thanks for joining us. That was Speed City. We'll be at Imola next weekend.